I'm Art Taylor, President and CEO of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance and host of the Heart of Giving podcast. You're about to experience our 200th consecutive episode, and I couldn't let this milestone go by without thanking the many people who made this possible. I want to start with Thad Housley, our producer from Media Tie Productions. It's Thad's skill and dedication that brought us these episodes each week. I want to thank the board and staff of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance for its unyielding support. I want to thank our guests who each week brought us content that opened up their lives and their stories to help us think about how we can be better givers, and for also giving us a shining example of how we can aspire to achieve a better world. And lastly, I want to thank you, our listeners. We do this so that you can get the tips and the inspiration that you need to go out and make a difference in the world. And as we head on to our next 200 episodes, you can be sure that we're going to continue to bring you great content with leading edge leaders who are making a difference in our society. And who knows, maybe you'll be one of our next 200 guests on the Heart of Giving podcast. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Dr. Gayle, your life has been one of impressive and inspiring achievement. So as to inspire others and provide a bit of role modeling, tell us how Helene Gayle, the young girl growing up in Buffalo, New York, became one of the most influential and service-oriented people in the country. Tell our listeners anything about your early life that pointed you to this amazing life of service.
Well, thanks for that. And, I guess for all of us, where we come from and the things that we learned growing up really do help to shape our lives. And I feel like I was very fortunate to be born into a family, felt that giving back was a part of what we were put on this earth for. My parents stressed to all five of us that it was important for us to get a good education, but that we should also use that education in a way that could contribute to making the society a better place and create positive social change. I also feel fortunate that I grew up in a time in the mid to late 60s when there was so much social change going on in our nation and around the world, whether it was the civil rights movement, women's liberation struggles in Africa, anti-war, all of these sorts of things, large movements where people were coming together to create positive change. And so for me, as a young adolescent and adolescent growing up during those times, it gave me the sense of wanting to be part of something bigger than myself. And I saw how people banding together could create really powerful social change. And so I think those two things, my family influence, the influence of the times that I grew up in, really did have a huge impact on me wanting to be able to be part of creating positive social change.
This is the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator, and it's your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. Today is a special day for me because we're here at the Reynolds Cottage on the campus of Spelman College to interview its president, Dr. Helene D. Gayle. Now, for those of you who follow the podcast, you will recall that Dr. Gayle was our first guest when we started the podcast. At that time, she was the head of the Chicago Community Trust, a major philanthropic organization working to achieve economic equality in the Chicago region. Dr. Gayle left that post, taking on this new responsibility to lead one of the most preeminent liberal arts colleges focused on women in America. We're so excited to have this opportunity to speak again with Dr. Gayle about the many things that she's been up to since we had that initial interview. Dr. Gayle, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Thanks for having me.
But I'm really interested in some of the decision making that you went through to leave that really important role that you had with the trust to come here to Spelman.
In one word, it was Spelman. It was a tough choice. I was really enjoying what I was doing. I felt like the work we were doing in Chicago, focused on closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap in the Chicago region, was important for Chicago, but it was also important for the nation. I thought it could be a national model of how do you actually look at economic equity and what are the practical ways in which you can actually have an impact on closing that economic gap. But when I was asked to consider coming to Spelman College, I had to ask myself, I've done a lot of things in my life professionally, and I have amassed a lot of different experiences, and I couldn't think of anything at this juncture in my career that would top giving back all the things that I had accumulated, if you will, over my 40 plus years of work experience to the next generation of young women who look like me. And I just felt like, it was hard to say no to the opportunity to do that, to help to shape the next generation of young African-American women who want to go on and change the world.
Well, and you're doing that, but you left the trust in a pretty good shape, pretty good situation as well, as I recall. I know you wanted to do some things while you were there. How do you feel your impact was in Chicago while you were there?
Well, I feel good about my time in Chicago, even though it was only 5 years. Because we were able to develop a new strategy. When I came to the trust, it didn't have a really defined strategy. It did a lot of giving to great organizations in the Chicago region, but we were able to really step back and think about if we wanted to have the biggest impact that we could have in the Chicago region, focusing on wealth and equality was a way of touching so many other inequalities. We know that if people have wealth, they will have greater access to health opportunities, greater access to educational opportunities. Violence goes down. There's a long list of issues that Chicago, just like so many other metropolitan cities, is dealing with. But at the heart of that, if one can change that wealth disparity, you can actually, it's kind of attacking the root cause, if you will, of so many of the other issues that we, found in Chicago, just like we have here in Atlanta. I mean, Chicago had one of the largest life expectancy gaps. But we know that health, although medical access to medical care is important, that health is determined as much by where you live and how you live, and whether or not you're able to feed your children, whether or not you're able to pass on intergenerational wealth. All of those things have a huge impact on health, which is my background. So I just felt like if we could attack the root cause, that wealth inequity, that wealth gap, that we could also have an impact on other issues. And so I feel like we did. I think we put in place a strategy that still lives on. I was able to recruit an excellent staff. They're continuing on making refinements as necessary, but really sticking to that issue of how to really make an impact on that wealth gap.
Terrific. So here at Spelman, what did you find when you came into your role?
Well, I found magic. Spelman really is a transformational experience. I hear so often young women say, when they're about to graduate, I came in here a very different person, and this experience has changed my life in a way that perhaps no other could have. And you see it in front of your very eyes. You see these young women who come, who witness excellence and greatness and a faculty that commits themselves, that has high expectation and, takes the time to make sure that our young students, our young women, feel that they're valued, feel that somebody cares about them, and feels that somebody has high expectations for what they can do. Along with the extracurricular activities that allow students to develop other aspects of themselves. So they get a really holistic experience here, mind, body, spirit, all of those things that really contribute to developing themselves as well-rounded adults. And they leave here with a sense of purpose. They leave here believing that they have the armor that will allow them to take on any experience outside of this campus and be successful.
How did you feel about how it's changed you?
I think it's given me a greater sense of self-confidence, to look around and see these young women, their own sense of belief in themselves. I think it's given me a gift as well. And the belief that you can change no matter what age you are. But for me to be on a campus and be surrounded by the kind of excellence that I see, you can be a geek, you can be an artist, you can be a writer, you can just be whoever you want to be. And there's other people who are like you that give you the sense that you can fit in no matter where. And, I talk to our young women and they say, in the school that I was at, I was always the quote, smart Black girl. I can come here and just be the smart girl. I can come here and just study. I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to have people who second guess whether or not I can achieve great excellence. And being around that kind of environment doesn't only change our students, it changes us as well.
When you think about an opportunity to grow and to thrive, as a scientist, an environment is key to that, right? What is it about this environment that enables that?
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, I think there is something about seeing people who look like you, who have achieved great excellence, being surrounded by that excellence, being around people who believe in you, who believe that you can achieve, who don't give up on you, who don't just write you off as a statistic, but believe that you can truly achieve. Having people who understand where you came from, what your experience is, and values that experience and believes that it's part of the richness that makes you who you are. So I think all of those things, along with excellent professors who, are demanding and rigorous, but again, give the support so that students can achieve, having extracurricular activities that support what you learn in the classroom, having opportunities for internships and other experiences, travel abroad. Almost 80% of our students have some opportunity, whether it's during the summer or during the full semester, to travel abroad and see the world. All of those kind of experiences, I think, are what goes into kind of our secret sauce in how we are able to turn out the excellent students that we do.
Well, speaking of environment, something makes that happen outside of the soft stuff that we're talking about. And that's the hard cash, right? It's money. And the college has been fortunate to have received a significant gift this year in the amount of about $100 million, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, the Rockefellers, if I'm not mistaken, made a significant gift early in the existence of the school that kind of set it apart. How do you link those two pieces of philanthropy?
Well, philanthropy has been critical for our ability to do the things that we do. And as you mentioned early on, the Rockefeller family provided the grant. In fact, they provided the grant that allows us to be on the space that we're on today. They were our first major philanthropic donor. And, that gift was one of the most significant ways in which we were able to start as Spelman. Not a lot of people know that our name is actually linked to the Rockefeller family. So Laura Spelman Rockefeller was the wife of J.D. Rockefeller. And Spelman decided, it wasn't the Rockefellers who asked for it, but we decided when we got that significant gift that it would be nice to name it after Laura Spelman Rockefeller and recognizing her family. Her family were big in the abolitionist movement. And so we wanted to honor the Spelman family. But my office is in Rockefeller Hall. There is a Laura Spelman Hall not far from here. Sisters Chapel, the famous chapel, is named after the two Spelman sisters. So there's a lot of history here that is linked to the Rockefeller and the Spelman families. And, we never forget it. Yeah. Our most recent gift was from one of our longest standing, in fact, now our longest standing donor. She's been very philanthropic over the years, but felt that it was time to give a transformational gift. $100 million. You said Spelman is used to that.
Not $100
million. Largest gift we've ever gotten, largest gift that any HBCU has gotten. And so, we're just pleased that we were the beneficiaries of that very generous gift. But I would also say, and I always like to point out that I feel like getting a gift of that size, $100 million, is not only for Spelman, but I think it says that HBCUs are worth it, that we're worth getting the kinds of gifts that up until this point have always been reserved essentially for predominantly white institutions. That said, for every $100 that a predominantly white institution gets for its endowment, an HBCU gets one. So we are still in a position, we estimate that it will take about 800 million more for us to be able to fully meet the financial needs of our students. And we have students, high need population, about 40% of our students, 40 plus, are Pell eligible, which means they come from the lowest income families. And we want a school that is economically diverse, but it's hard because we don't always have the resources to give the kind of money that will allow them to be debt-free when they graduate from college. So that's one of my biggest goals, is to continue raising resources so that we can be a school where financial need is never a barrier to a bright girl being able to have a Spelman education.
Well, one of the hallmarks of an education here is the liberal arts. I happen to have had the benefit of attending a liberal arts institution, and I can honestly say it helped me, although we'll have to talk about how much they think it helped me. But I think it helped me. But, we're in a world now where there's a lot of focus on tech. There's a lot of focus on educations that are really designed to give people a specific skill. And I'm starting to hear some pushback on that now, that the liberal arts are probably more critical than some of those types of education. Are you hearing similar thoughts about the comparison between a tech education and a liberal arts education?
Yeah, definitely. And, I would start by saying there is no one education that is right for every student.
Sure.
And so there may be students that getting a straight technical degree is the right thing for them. But I think what we've forgotten along the way as we've thought about college primarily as a way of entering the workforce is that the best thing that a young person can learn in their educational journey is how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. How can they be critical thinkers? How can they be analytic? In today's world where there's more and more information and people are believing whatever they read on the internet, we want students who are able to discern what's fact from fiction. How do I think critically about an issue so that I can come with my own opinions about things and not something that somebody fed me? How do I continue to be a lifelong learner because I've learned across a broad range of different areas? How do I solve problems when today's problems need to be solved in a multidisciplinary way where you cut across different areas of expertise to be able to solve problems? So, liberal arts, which teaches critical thinking and ability to be analytic, how to think about problems, all of those things I think are critical. And the soft skills I think that also go with the liberal arts education that are so important. We're hearing more and more from employers, yeah, she's really smart about this one area, but she really doesn't know how to connect the dots or doesn't understand, how to take a problem and think about it in a critical way. So I, am a strong, as a graduate of a liberal arts college myself, I'm a big believer in why that kind of education from the very beginning really sets you up well for the long haul.
Yeah. Let's talk about your philanthropy a little bit. A lot of it has to do with your board service and organizations that you've worked in. Organizations like CARE, organizations like the Centers for Disease Control, which isn't necessarily a nonprofit, but is all about service. The Chicago Trust we've talked about. But you're now also in a position, thankfully, from my perspective, to serve on some major foundation boards. Rockefeller being one, and also now the Gates Foundation. How are you able to help those organizations connect and give back to society in a way that's really meaningful and valuable?
Well, I hope that the fact that I have gone between being a practitioner, running organizations that often relied on philanthropic resources, and then being in the philanthropic world, that I'm better able to think about what goes on the ground as I'm in those roles in philanthropy. And I think it's so important that foundations and philanthropic organizations have people who have been on the ground, who understand the realities, so that as strategies are developed, as giving plans are developed, there's a sense of what's truly the situation for that person on the ground, and how can we be in a position to support that. I think sometimes foundations think more about how do the grantees support us. And I think it's so important to always keep in mind, who are we trying to have an impact on, and how do you do that in a way that lessens the burden on organizations that do rely on resources? How do you do that in a way that leads to scale, so that problems are not, that are big problems get the kinds of solutions that can actually address them? And how do you think about the sustainability so that the resources that are invested will have long-term impact? So I always say, having gone back and forth on both sides of the check, if you will, gives you an opportunity in both directions to, hopefully play an important part.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be doing this work for some time, we pray. What is your hope for what happens in 10, 20 years, both in our society and in your current role as president here, for the young women that you're mentoring and leading? What's your hope for us?
Well, first of all, let me say, when you start talking about 10, 20 years, I can give you my birth date and you'll figure out that math doesn't work.
We're living a lot longer, Helene.
I am totally dedicated to what I'm doing now, and hope that I will have the opportunity to do it for some time, to be able to actually make a difference. what I hope is that each of us in our respective positions and our respective roles can find ways that we can contribute to positive social change.
Yeah.
You know, you can be in a bank and be a positive force. You can be in a nonprofit and be a positive force. You can be in philanthropy. You can be in higher ed. I think there's so many ways in which, if your motivation is that you want the world to leave the world a little bit better than when you got on, there's so many ways to do that. And I think if you take that mindset, no matter where you are, no matter what the business, no matter what the organization, you will find a way to make that positive contribution. Yeah. It may only be by helping to mentor others, but it can be in a variety of different ways in which you're giving back in a way that you know is going to have a positive impact on our world.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to get ready for graduation, but you have an amazing speaker lined up for graduation this year. But you've also had lots of interesting people come here over the last year or so to speak to your students in the broader community. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, I feel fortunate that people do appreciate Spelman and what an illustrious school it is, and you know, hopefully will continue to be far into the future. So we've had the fortune of having the Federal Reserve chair here, Jerome Powell, and I like to laugh and say the day that he spoke at Spelman, the markets went up. I don't know if that's cause or effect, but hey, whatever. You know, we have the president of Kenya coming next week. We've had the deputy secretary of the Treasury here. We have Angela Bassett coming as our commencement speaker, but our honorary degree recipient is Ketanji Brown Jackson. Oh, yeah. So we had this wonderful experience with the tour, the HBCU tour of the Cast from a Different World. One of the most fun experiences I have had. So, you know, we're a place that people want to come to. We've had Alicia Keys here. I could go on and on. Tracy Ellis Ross. I could go on and on and on. Nicole Hannah-Jones. You know, we've been, you know, fortunate to have people who recognize the importance of Spelman as an institution and have wanted to be a part of it.
Well, the campus is beautiful.
Thank you. And we were just named one of the top 2 most beautiful schools in Georgia.
Oh, there you go. Well, I want to just thank you for doing this, of course. You got an amazing busy schedule, but you found some time to squeeze us in. I really appreciate it. But more largely for your long and prosperous and great career, helping people and giving back in ways that you have. We don't meet many people like you. And I just think it's so wonderful that you would give us this time to share yourself with people who may never get the chance to come across you, and just to themselves have a chance to thank you quietly for what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Art, equally, I would just say having this show and doing this podcast allows others to hear about different experiences that I hope will continue to expand their worlds as well. Thanks for allowing our voices to be heard. Thanks for doing this program. It means so much to me personally, but I think it means so much to our nation. So, and beyond. Thank you.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.